I sat at a conference table in a secure briefing room at the Pentagon, surrounded by 23 senior military officers, all men, most of them with decades of combat experience and enough medals and ribbons to fill display cases. This was a joint operations planning session for a high-risk extraction mission in Yemen, and I had been brought in specifically because JSOC believed my expertise was critical to mission success. I was the only woman in the room. That wasn't unusual. In my line of work, I was almost always the only woman present at senior planning sessions. I had stopped noticing it years ago, stopped letting it affect how I operated or presented information. What mattered was the mission, not the demographics of who was planning it. I wore simple fatigues with minimal identification. No name tape, no unit patches, just the rank insignia that indicated I was a lieutenant colonel. Most of the officers in the room didn't know who I was. They had been told a JSOC specialist would be attending, but they hadn't been given details about my background or operational history. That anonymity was deliberate. I had learned over 15 years that arriving without fanfare, without people knowing my reputation in advance, allowed me to assess how they actually thought and operated, whether they judged based on capability or made assumptions based on appearance and gender. The briefing had been running for 40 minutes, with various officers presenting intelligence assessments and operational considerations. I had remained quiet, observing, taking notes, waiting for the appropriate moment to contribute the specialized knowledge I had been brought in to provide. That's when Major General Caldwell noticed me. Caldwell was a SEAL, a 2-star general with a legendary career spanning 30 years. He had commanded at every level, conducted operations in every major conflict of the past 3 decades, and earned a reputation as a hard-charging warrior who didn't tolerate weakness or incompetence. He was also known for being old school in his views about women in combat roles. Not overtly hostile, but dismissive. He believed combat effectiveness came from physical dominance and aggressive action, and he made no secret of his skepticism that women could perform at the highest levels of special operations. He looked at me across the conference table with an expression mixing curiosity and condescension. "Excuse me, Lieutenant Colonel," he said, his tone casual but with an edge that suggested he was about to make some kind of point. "I don't believe we've been introduced. What's your operational background?" The room went quiet. Several officers shifted uncomfortably, recognizing that Caldwell was likely about to say something inappropriate but unwilling to intervene with a 2-star general. I met his eyes calmly, my expression neutral. "I'm here to provide specialized consultation on precision targeting and high-value individual elimination for the Yemen operation." Caldwell leaned back in his chair, a slight smile playing at his lips. Precision targeting. That's a nice euphemism. He looked around at the other officers, clearly playing to the room. "So you're a sniper, or you teach snipers, or you analyze sniper operations from an office somewhere." His tone made clear he assumed the latter, that I was a staff officer with academic knowledge but no real operational experience. Several officers looked down at their papers, uncomfortable but silent. I remained calm, not reacting to his condescension. I have operational experience in precision targeting across multiple theaters. Caldwell's smile widened slightly. He was enjoying this, establishing dominance, making a point about what he saw as the difference between real operators and people who talked about operations from safe positions. Operational experience. Good, good. He leaned forward slightly. "Let me ask you something, Lieutenant Colonel. How many kills do you have?" The room went completely silent. That question, asked in that tone, was a direct challenge. He was implying that I had no real combat experience, that I was a pretender in a room full of warriors, that my presence here was token diversity rather than operational necessity. Several officers looked genuinely uncomfortable now, but still nobody intervened. I held Caldwell's gaze steadily, my expression unchanged. 207 confirmed. The words dropped into the silence like a grenade. For approximately 3 seconds, nobody moved. Nobody breathed. The number was so far beyond what anyone in the room had expected that they couldn't immediately process it. Caldwell's smile faltered slightly, but he recovered quickly. 207, he repeated, his tone now openly mocking. That's quite a claim. That would make you… what? The most lethal sniper in U.S. military history? He looked around at the other officers, clearly expecting them to join him in dismissing such an obviously inflated claim. Yes, I said simply. It would. Caldwell's smile became more fixed, more aggressive. With all due respect, Lieutenant Colonel, that's impossible. The most accomplished snipers in U.S. history, operators who spent entire careers in combat, have confirmed kill counts around 150 to 170. You're claiming you've exceeded that by significant margin. You'll forgive me if I find that difficult to believe. His tone made clear he didn't just find it difficult to believe. He thought I was lying, inflating my record to justify my presence in this meeting. I remained completely calm, my body language relaxed, my expression neutral. I had encountered this kind of skepticism before, the disbelief that someone who looked like me could have accomplished what I had accomplished. A colonel sitting 3 seats down from Caldwell, a man named Patterson, who I recognized from previous JSOC operations, leaned over and whispered something urgently in the general's ear. Caldwell waved him off dismissively. I don't care what the paperwork says. I'm looking at someone who doesn't look like they've spent 15 years in sustained combat operations. 200 kills doesn't happen from an office or a training facility. Patterson whispered more urgently, his face showing stress. General, I really think you should… Caldwell cut him off again. Lieutenant Colonel, he said, his tone now carrying clear challenge. I've spent 30 years in special operations. I've served with the most accomplished snipers in our military. I've commanded operators who have more combat experience than most people in this room. And I can tell you with certainty that your claim of 207 confirmed kills is statistically impossible for someone of your apparent age and service time. He leaned back, satisfied that he had exposed what he saw as an obvious fraud. So let me ask you directly. Are you actually claiming you personally made 207 kills? Or are you perhaps conflating unit actions with personal achievement? The room was silent. Every officer present understood that Caldwell had just accused me of stolen valor, of claiming credit for actions I hadn't personally performed. Patterson tried one more time, his voice urgent and strained. General Caldwell, she's… I held up a slight hand, stopping Patterson. He fell silent, looking relieved that I was going to handle this myself. I looked directly at Caldwell, my expression still completely neutral, my tone calm and professional. General, every one of my 207 confirmed kills was verified by multiple sources, including forward air controllers, ground force commanders, and signals intelligence. Each kill was documented, analyzed, and confirmed through established protocols. My operational record has been reviewed by JSOC Command, by the Secretary of Defense, and by oversight committees that verify such claims. I paused briefly. If you would like to see the documentation, I can arrange for you to receive appropriate clearance to review the operational reports, though I should mention that most of those reports are classified at levels that would require significant time to process your access. Caldwell's face was getting red now, his confidence shaken, but his ego not allowing him to back down. Documentation can say anything. I'm asking what you've actually done, where you've actually operated, what missions you've actually conducted. Patterson finally managed to get a full sentence out, speaking quickly before Caldwell could cut him off again. General, she's Reaper 6. The effect was instantaneous and total. Caldwell's mouth was open, preparing to say something else dismissive, but no words came out. His face went from flushed red to pale white in approximately 2 seconds. His eyes went wide. His body language changed from aggressive confidence to something close to shock. Every other officer in the room who recognized the call sign had similar reactions: sudden stillness, wide eyes, the dawning realization that they had just witnessed a 2-star general mock and challenge one of the most legendary operators in U.S. Special Operations history. REAPER 6. The call sign was known throughout the Special Operations community, though most people had never met the operator who carried it. The commander of the most classified precision targeting program in JSOC, an operator who had conducted missions across 12 countries over 15 years. Someone whose confirmed kill count was the highest in U.S. military history, and whose operations had been so effective that enemy forces in multiple theaters had placed bounties on Reaper 6 without ever knowing the operator's real identity. The person young snipers were told about during training as an example of what perfect precision shooting looked like. The operator whose techniques and methods were studied and taught, but whose actual identity was so classified that even most senior officers had never been briefed on who Reaper 6 actually was. And Major General Caldwell had just spent the past 5 minutes mocking her, challenging her record, and implying she was inflating her achievements to justify her presence. Caldwell sat frozen, his face showing the progression from shock to dawning horror to the sick realization that he had just humiliated himself in front of 22 other senior officers. Patterson, who had been trying to warn him, spoke quietly. "General, Lieutenant Colonel Sarah Chen is Reaper 6. She's been operating under JSOC's most classified programs for 15 years. Her 207 confirmed kills were accumulated across operations in Afghanistan, Iraq, Syria, Yemen, Somalia, Pakistan, and 5 other countries I'm not authorized to name in this setting. She holds the record for longest confirmed kill at 2,847 meters. She's trained over 60% of the current Special Operations Sniper Force. And she's here because this mission requires her specific expertise in urban precision targeting." The room remained silent. Several officers were staring at me with new understanding, reassessing everything they had observed. Others looked at Caldwell with expressions mixing sympathy and second-hand embarrassment. I remained calm, my expression unchanged, as if the past 5 minutes hadn't happened. "General Caldwell," I said, my tone still professional and neutral, "if you have additional questions about my operational background, I'm happy to provide whatever information security clearances permit, but perhaps we should return to the mission briefing. The operational timeline is compressed and we have significant planning to complete." Caldwell seemed unable to speak. His mouth opened, but no words came out. He looked like a man who had just realized he had made a catastrophic error and didn't know how to recover. A 3-star general at the head of the table, who had been observing silently until now, spoke up. "I think that's an excellent suggestion, Lieutenant Colonel Chen. Let's proceed with your assessment of the targeting challenges for the Yemen operation. General Caldwell, I'm sure you have notes you need to review. Perhaps you should take a few minutes." It was a polite way of telling Caldwell to shut up and let the briefing continue. Caldwell nodded mutely, his face still pale, and sat back in his chair looking like he wanted the floor to open up and swallow him. I stood and walked to the front of the room, pulling up imagery and targeting data on the main display. "The target building presents significant challenges for precision targeting," I began, my tone calm and professional, as if the interruption had never happened. "Multiple high-value individuals in close proximity to civilians, limited sight lines, urban environment with significant collateral damage risks. For the next 40 minutes, I walked through the targeting plan, explaining sight lines, calculating probability of successful elimination versus collateral damage, detailing the specific sequence of shots that would be required to neutralize all targets before enemy forces could react. Every officer in the room listened with complete attention. Nobody interrupted. Nobody questioned my assessment. They understood now that they were receiving briefing from someone who had successfully executed variations of this mission dozens of times before. Caldwell sat silent throughout. his face showing he was processing not just the embarrassment of what had happened, but the realization of who he had challenged and mocked. When I finished the briefing and returned to my seat, the room remained quiet for a moment. Then the 3-star at the head of the table spoke. "Excellent analysis, Lieutenant Colonel. Your targeting plan is approved. We'll proceed with mission preparation based on your recommendations." He looked around the room. "Are there any other questions for Reaper 6? The use of my call sign was deliberate, a reminder to everyone present of who they were speaking with. Nobody had any questions. The briefing concluded and officers began filing out, several of them glancing at me with new respect and understanding. Caldwell remained seated as the room emptied, clearly waiting to speak with me privately. I gathered my materials calmly, in no hurry, letting him sit with his discomfort. When we were alone, he finally spoke, his voice quiet and strained. "Lieutenant Colonel, I need to apologize. What I said was completely out of line. I made assumptions that had no basis in fact. I challenged your credibility based on prejudice and ego. I'm sorry." I looked at him calmly, assessing whether the apology was genuine or just damage control. His face showed real shame, real understanding that he had been wrong. "General, I've encountered your skepticism before, though rarely so directly. The question you asked, 'How many kills do you have?' was meant to expose what you assumed was inflated credentials. You expected me to have no real combat experience because you couldn't conceive that someone who looked like me could have accomplished what I've accomplished." Caldwell nodded miserably. "That's exactly what I thought. And I was completely wrong." "Yes, you were. But you're not unique in that error. I've spent 15 years being underestimated, dismissed, and assumed to be less capable than I actually am. I've learned to use that underestimation as a tactical advantage." I stood. "Your assumption that I couldn't possibly have 207 kills was based on your preconceptions about who accomplishes such things. Those same preconceptions exist in our enemies. When they look at someone who appears unremarkable, someone who doesn't fit their mental image of a threat, they underestimate. That underestimation creates opportunities for me to operate in ways that conventional operators couldn't." Caldwell looked up at me. "I've spent 30 years believing I understood combat effectiveness. Today I learned I had blind spots I didn't even know existed. The question now is what you do with that knowledge," I said. "Do you learn from it? Do you question your other assumptions? Or do you go back to believing what you believed before because this was an isolated exception?" Caldwell was quiet for a long moment. "I want to learn from it. I need to learn from it. What you've accomplished, it challenges everything I thought I understood about capability and effectiveness." "Good," I said, "because that's exactly the lesson that needs to be learned. Capability doesn't announce itself. It doesn't always look like what you expect. And the most dangerous mistake an operator can make is assuming they can judge someone's ability based on appearance or preconception." I walked toward the door, then paused and looked back at him. "General, your question about my kill count was meant to expose a fraud. Instead, it exposed your assumptions. Remember that the next time you're tempted to judge someone without verification." I left him sitting alone in the briefing room, processing what had just happened and what it meant about his own blind spots and biases. The story would spread through the senior officer community within days. The general who mocked Reaper 6 and learned the hard way that assumptions were dangerous. It would become another reminder that capability came in forms that defied expectation. That the most lethal operator in U.S. military history didn't look like what people expected, and that asking, "How many kills do you have?" as a challenge could result in an answer that shocked everyone in the room. I returned to my temporary office at the Pentagon and sat down to review the mission planning documents that would need to be finalized before the Yemen operation could proceed, but my mind kept returning to that briefing room, to Caldwell's question, to the moment when Patterson had whispered my call sign and watched the general's face transform from mocking confidence to pale shock. I had seen that reaction before, many times over 15 years. The moment when someone realized that the person they had dismissed or underestimated was actually Reaper 6. It never got old, though I took no particular pleasure in it. It was simply a recurring confirmation that my operational advantage, the thing that had kept me alive and effective for a decade and a half, remained intact. Being underestimated was my greatest weapon. Let me explain what Reaper 6 actually means, since Caldwell and most of the officers in that room only knew the legend, not the reality. I became a sniper almost by accident. I had joined the Army at 19 with plans to work in intelligence analysis. I was good at languages, good at pattern recognition, good at the kind of analytical thinking that made for effective intelligence work. But during advanced training, an instructor noticed that I had exceptional visual acuity and steady hands. He suggested I try shooting qualifications just to see how I performed. I qualified expert on my first attempt, not just passing scores, but perfect scores on assessments that most soldiers struggled with. The instructor recommended me for advanced marksmanship training, and I found that I had a natural aptitude for precision shooting that went beyond normal capability. I could see things at distances other people couldn't. I could calculate wind, distance, and trajectory instinctively, without conscious thought. I could control my breathing and heartbeat to the point where I became almost perfectly still. And I had the patience to wait for hours or days until the perfect shot presented itself. Those abilities got me selected for sniper school, where I excelled beyond anyone's expectations, including my own. I graduated top of my class and was immediately assigned to a scout sniper platoon deploying to Afghanistan. That's where I made my first kill. A Taliban commander at 800 meters who was coordinating an attack on a U.S. forward operating base. I took the shot from a position in the mountains overlooking the valley. Perfect conditions, clear sight line, no complications. He dropped instantly and the attack fell apart without his leadership. It felt surreal. One moment there was a living person planning violence. The next moment he was gone because I had squeezed a trigger. I had ended a human life from a distance where he never saw me, never knew I existed, never had any chance to defend himself. I spent that night trying to process what I had done and what it meant about who I was. But the next day, intelligence reports confirmed that the commander I had killed had been responsible for at least 30 coalition deaths and countless Afghan civilian casualties. His removal had disrupted an entire terrorist network and saved lives that would have been lost if he had continued operating. That's when I understood what precision targeting actually meant. It wasn't about killing, it was about surgical removal of people who caused violence, done with such precision that it prevented greater violence from occurring. Over my first deployment, I made 37 confirmed kills. Taliban commanders, weapons specialists, bomb makers, people whose removal degraded enemy capabilities and saved coalition and civilian lives. I operated from concealed positions at distances where enemies never saw me coming. I became known in the intelligence community as someone who could eliminate targets that other methods couldn't reach. That's when Delta Force recruited me. They had been watching my performance and realized I had capabilities their unit needed. I went through Delta selection, completed the training, and was immediately deployed on specialized missions where precision targeting was critical. For the next 4 years with Delta, I operated across Afghanistan, Iraq, and locations I still can't discuss. My kill count grew steadily. Enemy commanders, terrorist leaders, insurgent specialists, always from distance, always precise, always verified. But something changed during those years. I realized that my greatest advantage wasn't just my shooting ability. It was the fact that enemies never expected someone who looked like me to be a threat. When Delta sent male snipers into certain environments, those snipers had to operate from extreme distances because their presence was assumed to be hostile. But I could get much closer to targets because in many cultures, women simply weren't perceived as potential threats. That realization led to my recruitment into JSOC's most classified program. a unit that specialized in precision targeting of high-value individuals in denied territories where conventional operations were impossible. They needed operators who could infiltrate close to targets, gather intelligence, and execute eliminations with perfect precision. I was ideal for the role. I could blend into populations where male operators stood out. I could move through territories by appearing unremarkable and non-threatening, and I could make shots from positions that conventional snipers couldn't access. That's when I became Reaper 6. The designation indicated I was the 6th operator to command the unit, though the number also had operational meaning that remained classified. Over the next 11 years, I conducted operations that pushed precision targeting beyond anything that had been done before. Not just long-range shots from static positions, but dynamic urban operations, close-range eliminations in populated areas, surgical strikes that remove specific individuals from complex environments without collateral damage. My longest confirmed kill was in Syria, a terrorist leader coordinating attacks across the region from a compound outside Damascus. I positioned myself in an apartment building 2,847 meters away, calculated every variable, including the slight curvature of the earth at that distance, and made the shot through a window opening measured in centimeters. Perfect hit. The target eliminated, the operation completed, and I was out of the country within 6 hours. That shot became legendary in the special operations community. Most snipers considered anything beyond 2,000 meters to be at the edge of possibility. I had exceeded that by nearly a kilometer and done it in an urban environment with countless variables. But the legend missed something important. That shot was only possible because I had spent 3 weeks in Damascus establishing a cover identity, gathering intelligence, and positioning myself in a location where nobody suspected an American sniper could be operating. The shooting skill mattered, but the infiltration and intelligence work mattered more. That's been true of all my operations. The shooting is the final step, the execution of a plan that requires weeks or months of preparation. The kills that make up my record aren't just marksmanship achievements. They're the culmination of infiltration, intelligence gathering, patience, and the ability to operate in environments where conventional forces can't reach. And the reason I can operate in those environments is because people consistently underestimate me. They see someone unremarkable, someone who doesn't fit their mental image of an elite operator, and they assume I'm not a threat. That underestimation has kept me alive for 15 years. It's allowed me to get close to targets who were protected against conventional threats. It's enabled operations that saved countless lives by removing people who were orchestrating violence. 207 confirmed kills, each one verified through multiple sources. Each one a specific individual whose removal disrupted terrorist networks, prevented attacks, and saved lives that would have been lost if those individuals had continued operating. I don't take pride in the number itself. Each kill represents a human life, ended. But I take responsibility for ensuring that each elimination was necessary, justified, and executed with precision that minimized any possibility of collateral damage. My phone buzzed with a message from Patterson, the colonel who had tried to warn Caldwell before the situation escalated. "Ma'am, I apologize for not intervening more forcefully. General Caldwell's behavior was inappropriate, and I should have stopped him sooner. For what it's worth, what happened today will be widely discussed. Everyone in that room learned something important about assumptions and respect." Patterson. I appreciated the message but didn't respond immediately. What had happened in that briefing room wasn't really about me or Caldwell. It was about a recurring pattern I had encountered throughout my career, the assumption that someone who looked like me couldn't possibly be as capable as the legend suggested. Caldwell wasn't unique. He was just more direct than most in voicing the skepticism that many officers felt when they encountered me for the first time. I had learned over the years not to take it personally. The skepticism was actually useful. It meant I could continue operating with the element of surprise, with the advantage of being consistently underestimated. My computer chimed with a secure message from JSOC Command. REAPER 6, Yemen mission approved per your targeting plan. Deploy in 72 hours. Mission critical window requires your personal participation for complex urban elimination. Confirm availability. I reviewed the mission parameters again. 3 high-value targets in a single building in downtown Sana'a. Civilian population density made airstrikes impossible. Ground assault would alert targets and cause significant collateral damage. This required what I specialized in: infiltration, positioning, and surgical elimination of all 3 targets within a window measured in seconds. I confirmed my availability and began mission preparation. Within 72 hours, I would be in Yemen under a cover identity, positioning myself for shots that most snipers would consider impossible. But first, I had one more thing to address regarding the briefing room incident. I drafted a message to Caldwell, not through official channels, but through a secure system that would reach him personally. General Caldwell, your question about my kill count was based on assumptions about capability and appearance. Those same assumptions exist in our enemies, which is why I've been effective for 15 years. Being underestimated is a tactical advantage I protect carefully. What happened today will become a story that spreads through the officer community. That's fine. The story reinforces the lesson that assumptions are dangerous. But I want you to understand something. Your skepticism wasn't unusual. It was typical. Most people can't reconcile my appearance with my operational record. That disconnect is what keeps me alive and effective. So in a strange way, your assumption today was a reminder that my operational advantage remains intact. Learn from the experience. Question your other assumptions. And remember that capability doesn't always announce itself. REAPER 6. I sent the message and returned to mission planning. The Yemen operation would be complex, dangerous, and would require everything I had learned over 15 years of precision targeting. But it was also exactly the kind of mission that justified why REAPER 6 existed, why JSOC had invested in developing capabilities that pushed beyond conventional operations, why precision targeting mattered in an era where surgical elimination of specific threats was often more effective than overwhelming force. 207 confirmed kills, each one a story, each one a mission that required infiltration, intelligence, patience, and perfect execution. And number 208, 209, and 210 would be added to that count in Yemen within the week. Because that's what REAPER 6 did. Operated in shadows, removed threats that couldn't be reached by conventional means, and did it with such precision that enemies never understood how it happened until it was too late. The legend was real. The 207 kills were verified and documented. The longest shot in military history was mine, but the legend missed the most important part. Those achievements were only possible because I operated with the advantage of being consistently underestimated, because I didn't look like what people expected an elite operator to look like. And as long as people like Caldwell continued making those assumptions, I would continue having the tactical advantage that had kept me alive and effective for 15 years. The briefing room incident would become another story in the legend of REAPER 6, another reminder that assumptions were dangerous and capability came in unexpected forms, and I would continue operating exactly as I had always operated, in shadows, underestimated, precise, and absolutely lethal when the moment required it. That was the reality behind the legend. The truth that most people never understood even when they learned my name and my record. Being REAPER 6 wasn't about being the most lethal sniper in history. It was about understanding that lethality came from precision, patience, and the tactical advantage of operating where nobody expected to find you. 72 hours after the Pentagon briefing, I was in Sana'a, Yemen, operating under a cover identity as Isabelle Moreau, a French photojournalist. I wore a headscarf and conservative clothing, carried camera equipment, and moved through the city with the weary confidence of someone who had covered too many conflict zones. Nobody looked at me and saw a threat. That invisibility was exactly what the mission required. 3 high-value targets were in a 4-story building, coordinating terrorist operations across Yemen. Intelligence indicated they were planning a major attack. Conventional operations couldn't reach them without significant collateral damage, so JSOC sent me alone. I had rented a room 600 meters from the target building with clear sightlines to where they met. I spent the day maintaining my journalist cover, taking photographs, buying food from vendors, speaking Arabic with a French accent. As evening approached, I returned to my room and set up my shooting position. Custom .338 Lapua Magnum assembled and aimed at the target building. I calculated every variable: distance, elevation, wind, temperature, humidity. At 1847 hours, my support team confirmed all 3 targets were entering the meeting room. I controlled my breathing, slowed my heart rate, became absolutely still. Through my scope, I watched them gather near the windows, all 3 visible, separated by approximately 2 meters each. This was the moment. I calculated the sequence, left to right, furthest from escape routes first squeeze, first target down. I adjusted for recoil, acquired the second target who was just beginning to react. Second squeeze, second target eliminated. Elapsed time, 3 seconds. The third target was moving toward cover, but I had already calculated where he would be when my bullet arrived. Third squeeze, third target down. Total mission time, 6 seconds. I disassembled my rifle within 90 seconds, concealed it in my camera bag, and walked out calmly. Nobody stopped me. Nobody connected the foreign journalist with the precision strike that had just eliminated 3 high-value targets. I moved through Sana'a toward extraction. The mission was complete. 0 collateral damage. Perfect precision in the heart of hostile territory. My support team confirmed through signals intelligence that the terrorist organization was in chaos, trying to understand how all 3 leaders had been killed simultaneously with no indication of where the shots came from. They would never know. By the time I reached extraction 12 hours later, intelligence showed the network fragmenting without its leadership. Planned attacks were being abandoned. 3 trigger pulls had changed the security situation across an entire region. I returned to the United States 48 hours later through channels that didn't officially exist. Nobody at checkpoints recognized the tired woman in travel clothes as the operator who had just conducted a perfect precision strike. My debrief at Fort Bragg walked through every decision and calculation. The Yemen mission had been textbook perfect, but I still identified 3 improvements for future operations. That constant analysis was what had kept me alive and effective for 15 years. After the debrief, I finally allowed myself to decompress. I had killed 3 human beings from 600 meters, ended 3 lives with precision that left no room for error. Those 3 had been planning violence that would have killed many others, but they were still human beings with families and histories. I didn't feel guilt. The mission had been necessary and justified, but I felt the weight of responsibility, the understanding that what I did had permanent consequences. My phone buzzed with a message from JSOC Command. Yemen mission assessed as textbook success. 0 collateral damage. All targets eliminated. Intelligence reports major disruption of terrorist networks. Another message followed from General Caldwell. Lieutenant Colonel Chen, I learned today about the Yemen operation you conducted within days of our meeting. 3 targets eliminated with perfect precision in hostile territory. I'm beginning to understand what 207 confirmed kills actually represents. I owe you more than an apology. I owe you respect for capabilities I didn't understand. Caldwell. I saved both messages and lay back, processing the mission and its outcomes. 210 confirmed kills now. 3 more surgical strikes that had removed threats and disrupted violence. The legend of Reaper 6 would grow larger. The Yemen story would spread through intelligence channels, though details would remain classified. People would talk about impossible precision, perfect execution, the operator who could infiltrate hostile territory and eliminate targets conventional forces couldn't reach. But the legend would still miss the most important part. That all of it was possible because I operated with the advantage of being consistently underestimated. Because enemies couldn't conceive that someone who appeared unremarkable was actually the most lethal precision operator in U.S. military history. General Caldwell's mocking question had been meant to expose a fraud. Instead, it exposed his own assumptions. And those same assumptions, held by enemies across multiple theaters, were what had allowed me to operate successfully for 15 years. The mission was complete. The targets were eliminated, and I was already preparing for the next operation. Because that's what Reaper 6 did. Operated in shadows, removed threats with precision, and did it with the tactical advantage of being consistently underestimated. 5 years after that Pentagon briefing, I had transitioned from active operations to training development. At 43, after 18 years and 231 confirmed kills, Reaper 6 had been passed to my successor. The legend would continue without me in the field, but my mission had evolved into something equally important. Teaching the next generation of precision operators at a classified facility where the military's most promising snipers came for advanced training. What I taught wasn't just shooting. Technical marksmanship was only one component. I taught complete operational framework, infiltration, intelligence gathering, patience, cultural awareness, invisibility, and most importantly, the tactical advantage of being underestimated. Last month, General Caldwell visited before his retirement after 33 years of service. He looked older. 5 years and senior command had aged him. But his expression was different from that Pentagon briefing. No condescension, just genuine respect mixed with humility. "Colonel Chen," he said, "I wanted to see what you've built. Everyone in Special Operations talks about your training program transforming how we develop precision operators." He showed me operational reports from the past 5 years. Snipers trained under my program had achieved 94% mission success rate, eliminated high-value targets in 17 countries, conducted precision strikes that saved countless lives. More importantly, they had internalized lessons about questioning assumptions. They verified before judging. They understood that threats came in forms that defied expectation. "That cultural shift started with you," Caldwell said. "You've demonstrated that capability transcends appearance, that underestimation is a weapon, that the most effective operators are often invisible until they're not." I appreciated his words, but was more interested in practical impact than philosophical reflection. "General, what are you going to do with this understanding after retirement?" "I'm joining a national security think tank. I plan to advocate for approaches that value precision over force, that recognize capability comes in unexpected forms, that challenge assumptions about effective operations." He paused. "And I'm going to tell the story of that Pentagon briefing. Not to embarrass myself, though that's part of it, but to illustrate the danger of assumptions and the importance of verifying before judging." I walked to my window overlooking the training range. "General, that briefing was one incident among hundreds where I've been underestimated. You weren't unique. You were just more direct. What matters is that you learned from being wrong, that you've questioned other assumptions, that you're using your mistake to teach others. That's leadership growth that creates cultural change." We watched my students train. A young female Army Ranger made a perfect shot at 1,800 meters in variable wind, then immediately broke down her position and disappeared into terrain within seconds. "She represents the future of precision operations," I said. "Operators who combine technical excellence with cultural awareness, patience, and the ability to become invisible." After Caldwell departed, I returned to my training range. 15 operators from various special operations units, all learning to question assumptions, to operate with patience and precision. One student asked, "Ma'am, is it true what people say about the Pentagon briefing?" It's true. I felt the same thing I've felt hundreds of times over 18 years, the advantage of being underestimated. Another student, "Those of us who don't look like conventional operators face those assumptions constantly. How do we turn that into advantage?" By understanding that underestimation creates opportunities. People who dismiss you aren't watching carefully. They're not anticipating your capabilities. They're creating gaps you can exploit. The challenge is maintaining discipline to use those gaps effectively rather than being distracted by disrespect. Every one of you will face assumptions about your capabilities. You can let those assumptions limit you, or you can weaponize them into tactical advantages. The choice is yours. That evening, I received a message from my successor, the current REAPER 6, deployed in North Africa. Colonel Chen just completed operation in Tripoli. Target eliminated from 2,200 meters. Zero collateral damage. Used your infiltration protocols and patience over aggression approach. The training you developed made this mission possible. REAPER 6. I saved that message alongside hundreds of others. Operators whose careers had been shaped by my training. Missions that succeeded because people applied lessons I had taught. 231 confirmed kills over 18 years, each one representing surgical precision that removed threats and saved lives. But the real legacy wasn't those numbers. It was the cultural transformation spreading through special operations. The understanding that capability transcended appearance, that assumptions were vulnerabilities, that the most effective operators were often invisible until they weren't. General Caldwell's mocking question 5 years ago had been meant to expose a fraud. Instead, it exposed systemic assumptions that limited operational effectiveness. And it created a teaching moment that continued spreading through military culture, challenging biases and improving how we assessed capability. The legend of REAPER 6 would continue. New operators would carry the designation. The numbers would grow. But the most important legacy was the lesson. That capability came in forms that defied expectation. That the person you underestimated might be the most accomplished operator you'd ever meet. That asking, "How many kills do you have?" as a challenge could result in an answer that shocked everyone and changed how an entire generation thought about effectiveness and assessment. I returned to my office and began preparing tomorrow's training curriculum. More lessons to teach, more operators to develop, more capabilities to spread across the next generation. The work continued, the mission evolved, and the legacy of being consistently underestimated remained the most powerful tactical advantage I could pass on to those who would carry precision operations forward.